How big do you see as the data center issue? I'm hearing that lots of people think that Crowley is weak on the data center issue because he won't flat out come out for a moratorium. And somehow Tiffany is trying to make himself look as the more progressive one in that issue. Do you see the data center issue as being a wash between them?
This is the most fascinating conversation, maybe not just in this campaign, but in America right now, is what's
Yeah.
happening with data centers, right? And we could probably spend an hour just on this, but we don't have that kind of time. I, I think at this point, the idea of a moratorium is nothing but virtue signaling.
Hmm.
I'm sorry. I know it feels good to people, but when was the last time a data center started construction in Wisconsin?
I don't know.
It's been almost a year. So we've essentially had a moratorium. And what has that gotten us? Not a damn thing, because there are still no rules of the road. What David Crowley is saying is rather than artificially extend a pause to virtue signal, here are the rules of the road I want in place. I want the developers to pay for all of the infrastructure. And I want them to put new renewable forms of energy infrastructure onto the grid. I want no NDAs. I want transparency. I want, if a local community says no, that's the ball game. Nobody can force them to do it. Those rules of the road are much more important than just saying, we're just going to take a break. To me, anyways. And so I,
What would
I
you
think,
say to the argument, Joe, though, that both Crowley and Tiffany on this issue are compromised by special interests, right? So on the Democratic side, we know a lot of labor unions really want data centers. They see them as job creation, potentially good paying jobs, and so on. And the Republicans, of course, there's the tech bro oligarchs that want this stuff. What would you say to people who say that, regardless of what Crowley and Tiffany say, there are these interests that are actually controlling their views on this?
I would be a lot more concerned about the tech bros than
Yeah,
I
I
am
would
about
too.
organized labor. And this is, to me, deeply unsettling that some on the left have decided that it is appropriate to lump organized labor and the men and women of our building trades in with that other crowd. Because the reality is, if you are a laborer or a carpenter or an operating engineer in Wisconsin, you got to live in these communities too. Nobody in organized labor is saying, here's a blank check, start construction tomorrow. All of those building trades unions were trying to get the Jody Haber-Synekin bill passed to put those rules of the road in place.
Hmm.
And now they're supporting someone in David Crowley who is saying, here are some pretty high bars you got to meet if you want to build here. Not just millions of billions of dollars of infrastructure improvements. And so the idea that organized labor, the people who work here and build our communities, don't give a rip about the communities they have to live in, like, come on, that's not serious. And David Crowley has never taken a vote like Tom Tiffany did in Congress as the deciding vote to try to ban states, any state in the country, from regulating AI at all
Yeah,
for 10 years. That's the Tom Tiffany record. And so
yeah.
the idea that this is somehow a close choice between Tiffany and Crowley when it comes to data centers doesn't pass the smell test to me.
Can you imagine, though, a set of guardrails, no matter how strict and firm they are, that a community that is currently opposed to a data center would all of a sudden be okay with it?
Yes,
You can.
I can. I listen, we're seeing this around the country. I forget the name of the parish, but like, there's a community in Louisiana where, as part of the community benefits package, every teacher in the parish is getting a $50,000 cash bonus. That's more than most of their salaries for public school teachers. In Neenah, Wisconsin, where there used to be, was it Neenah or Kaukauna, where there used to be the operating nuclear facility. You know, you're familiar with
Yeah,
this. You're up in
not,
the northeast part, right?
yeah. I can't remember. It's not Nina. I don't think it's Kakana either. But what about
But
it?
in that community, property taxes were lower than anywhere else in the state because the company that ran it struck that deal with the local unit of government, right? So there, it was providing jobs and tax benefits. So listen, I understand why people are pissed. The people at the top of these corporations are basically cartoon villains at this point. And nobody has seemingly told them no, even once in the last 20 years. So it feels really good to be like, we're the ones who are going to say no to this. And I, speaking just for myself, am a pro-growth Democrat, right?
Hmm.
You're worried about the debt, you're worried about, affordability. You know what the answer to all of it is? Grow the economy, create jobs, speed up the velocity of money. And if you take out the data center build out from the macroeconomic figures for 2025, the US economy was standing still. It just was. It was 0.1% increase in national GDP without the data centers. And so I think what Wisconsin should be doing is coming from a place of we have the leverage because of our access to fresh water. We have leverage because of our incredible workforce. How do we get to yes with a good deal for taxpayers that protects our natural resources at a time when the technology and all of this is improving by the minute? And I'll just never be somebody who defaults to no. I don't think that's productive.
Joe, this might be a good transition into the issue of how does David Crowley get the Francesca Hong supporters on board? Because it's a lot of young people, and I've heard a lot of them say that it's these pro-growth Democrats that are the problem. They believe that you're willing to put the economy above our environment. You sweep environmental issues under the rug. You give it lip service. You're while you're obviously opposed to, say, the tech bros, when push comes to shove, you might give in to them for the promise of some jobs. That's what a lot of the Hong supporters believe is the problem with, say, Crowley. What does Crowley do to get those folks on board? Because I don't think it's enough that they just vote for him, is it?
Well, it's better than the alternative. Listen, what David Crowley and what everybody on the left ought to be trying to do is building a pro-democracy coalition that is big enough to include the Francesca Hong DSA aligned left and never Trump Republicans or former MAGA voters who
Yeah.
have voted for Trump two or three times and now realized, oh my God, I was being lied to. He never had any intention of keeping his word. And so that's an awfully big coalition. And but it's what is required at this moment of creeping authoritarianism, of, the authoritarian playbook being sort of rolled out bit by bit. And so what I understand as someone who was once young and a very passionate organizer and activist, right, before I became a grumpy old man who's part of the problem, that it's not easy
No.
right? It's not. And so that's where I believe it is always best to be honest and transparent and authentically yourself and say what you believe with your chest. Because I believe it's not just the positions. I think it's the body language and the tone and the tenor of how so much of our political communication works
Mm.
that makes people go, whether they're young or young at heart, go, I don't believe you. Right. And David Crowley is going to be accused of a lot of things in this campaign. I don't think
Yeah.
anyone is ever going to accuse him of not believing what he said, what he is saying and standing on principle.